A widowed and lonely man finds a huge black bear in his pool. Intrigued by the visitor, he installs security cameras to observe the animal's behavior. What the footage reveals brings the man to tears. The sun was setting slowly over the mountains of Vermont, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple that reflected in the windows of Michael Ramirez's solitary house. Seated in his old leather armchair, he observed the horizon through the large window overlooking the backyard, where a swimming pool, now unused, gleamed like a mirror under the fading light. The thermometer on the wall read 95 degrees Fahrenheit, an unusually high temperature for the region. Michael sighed deeply as his fingers caressed the silver frame holding Isabella's photograph. Her smile, frozen in time, seemed more alive than ever, in contrast to the silence that now reigned in the house. 2 years had passed since she left, but the void she left behind seemed to grow with each passing day. "My love," he whispered in Spanish, as he always did when speaking to her photograph, "the heat is unbearable this year. You would have loved using the pool I built for you." He stood up with difficulty, his 62 years weighing more heavily than ever on his shoulders. The wooden floor creaked beneath his feet as he walked to the kitchen. The house, a modest but cozy structure they had bought together 30 years ago, held memories of their shared life in every corner. The sound of the local news filled the silence of the kitchen as Michael prepared his dinner, a simple plate of beans and rice, like the ones his mother used to make for him in Mexico. The news anchor was talking about the unprecedented heat wave hitting the region. Authorities warn that the high temperatures are significantly affecting local wildlife. There have been reports of wild animals spotted near residential areas in search of water and food. Michael barely paid attention, lost in his thoughts as he mechanically stirred the beans in the pot. His eyes drifted to the calendar on the wall, where a date was marked with a red circle. Isabella's birthday was approaching. The sound of branches cracking in the backyard snapped him out of his thoughts. Michael frowned, turned off the stove, and approached the large window. Daylight was fading rapidly, but he could still make out the silhouettes of the trees surrounding his property, swaying gently in the evening breeze. "Must be a deer," he muttered to himself, accustomed to the occasional visits from local wildlife. However, something in the atmosphere felt different tonight. He decided to go out to the yard to investigate. The hot air hit him like a slap when he opened the sliding door. The outdoor thermometer read almost 100 degrees Fahrenheit, despite the sun having almost completely set. Michael walked slowly towards the pool, his sandals making a soft sound against the hot concrete. The pool, his labor of love for Isabella, remained full and clean, though no one had used it in 2 years. Michael didn't have the heart to empty it. It was as if by keeping it this way, he preserved a part of her, of their shared dreams. He stopped short when he heard a splash. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but then he saw it, a huge dark mass moving in the water. His heart raced when the creature raised its head, revealing the characteristic snout of an American black bear. Michael held his breath, paralyzed. The bear, equally surprised, stared at him. For a moment that seemed eternal, human and beast observed each other under the growing darkness of nightfall. To his amazement, Michael felt no fear. There was something in the animal's eyes, something that conveyed a strange familiarity. The bear continued swimming calmly, as if the pool were its natural territory. Michael slowly backed away towards the house, never taking his eyes off the improbable visitor. Once inside, he closed the sliding door and leaned against it, his heart pounding. "Isabella," he whispered, a small smile forming on his lips. "You won't believe what just happened." That night, for the first time in a long time, Michael didn't dine alone. He sat by the large window, watching in fascination as the bear enjoyed the cool water. As he ate his beans, he began to formulate a plan. Tomorrow, he would install cameras in the yard. He needed to document this strange encounter. When he finally went to bed, the silence of the house no longer felt so heavy. The encounter with the bear had awakened something in him, a spark of curiosity and excitement he thought was lost. As he settled into his bed, which still preserved Isabella's side untouched, Michael smiled in the darkness. "Looks like the pool finally found a new purpose," he murmured before closing his eyes, anticipating what the next day might bring. The next morning dawned as hot as the day before. Michael woke up before dawn, something he hadn't done since his days working in construction. With precise and silent movements, he began to install the security cameras he had bought months ago at his daughter Elena's insistence. but had never used. "Who would have thought I'd end up using them for this?" he muttered, as he adjusted the first device on a tree near the pool. Sweat was already soaking his shirt, despite the early hour. As he worked, his mind wandered through memories. Isabella had always been a nature lover. "Michael," she used to tell him, "every creature has its purpose in this world. We just need to open our eyes to see it." At that moment, adjusting cameras to capture a bear's visit to his pool, her words took on new meaning. The news on his kitchen radio continued reporting on the unprecedented heat wave. Meteorologists predicted that temperatures would continue to rise over the next few weeks. Michael listened attentively as he prepared his breakfast, paying special attention to warnings about wildlife. "Experts recommend maintaining distance from any wild animals that approach residential areas," the announcer warned. Michael smiled to himself, thinking of his peculiar visitor. By mid-morning, he had installed 4 cameras strategically located around the pool, each one connected to his old iPad, which now rested on the dining room table, showing different angles of the yard. Technology wasn't his forte, but the excitement of being able to observe the bear had motivated him to learn quickly. The heat increased with each passing hour. Michael watched the thermometer rise relentlessly as he went about his daily tasks. However, unlike previous days, he now found himself constantly checking the camera images on his tablet. Near noon, while watering the plants that Isabella had loved so much, he heard a familiar noise coming from the woods. His heart raced when he saw the bear emerging from between the trees. It was even more impressive in daylight. Its black fur shone under the sun, and its size was truly imposing. Michael remained motionless, observing from the safety of his porch as the bear approached the pool. The animal seemed to move with a clear purpose, as if it knew the path by heart. Without hesitation, it plunged into the water, splashing drops that sparkled like diamonds under the midday sun. "I'll call you Ramon," Michael decided out loud, remembering his grandfather, a strong and determined man who had been his guide in life. "You have his same dignified bearing." As he watched Ramon swim, Michael noticed something interesting. The bear seemed to be following a pattern. It would swim for a few minutes, get out of the water, look towards the forest, and repeat the process. It was as if it were watching something or someone. The afternoon passed with Michael alternating between his household chores and observing his new tenant. Every time he checked the cameras, he felt a mix of excitement and curiosity. It was as if he had discovered a wonderful secret that only he knew. At sunset, while reviewing the day's recordings, Michael noticed something he had overlooked. In one of the shots, Ramon appeared picking up some fallen fruits from the trees near the pool. The curious thing was that he didn't eat them right there, but carried them with him towards the forest. "Who are those for?" he wondered aloud, leaning closer to the screen. The question hung in the air of the kitchen as the sun set on the horizon, painting the sky in reddish tones. That night, sitting in his favorite armchair, Michael made a decision. Tomorrow he would leave some food near the pool. Not much, just enough to see what Ramon would do with it. He knew feeding wild animals wasn't advisable, but something inside told him there was more to this story than he could see. Before going to sleep, he checked the cameras one last time. The pool gleamed under the moonlight, calm and serene. Michael smiled, thinking about how a simple act of seeking refuge from the heat had initiated something that was beginning to give new meaning to his lonely days. "Good night, Ramon," he whispered as he turned off the lights. "See you tomorrow." The early morning found Michael preparing a mix of fruits and honey in a plastic container. His hands, wrinkled from years of hard work, moved with precision as he cut apples and pears. The kitchen filled with the sweet aroma of the honey Isabella used to buy at the local market. "Am I doing the right thing?" he asked aloud, remembering the warnings about not feeding wildlife, but something in his heart told him Ramon needed help. The thermometer already read 85 degrees Fahrenheit when Michael went out to the yard. He placed the container at a prudent distance from the pool, where the cameras could clearly capture it. The air was dense and heavy, presaging another day of extreme heat. As he returned to the house, he noticed that the plants in the garden were showing signs of heat stress. The flowers Isabella had planted years ago were struggling to survive, their wilted petals drooping towards the ground. Michael watered them with extra care, whispering words of encouragement as his wife used to do. He didn't have to wait long. Barely an hour after sunrise, the cameras caught movement. Ramon emerged from the forest, his black fur gleaming under the morning light. He stopped upon seeing the container, sniffing the air cautiously. Michael held his breath as he watched the iPad screen. The bear approached the container, sniffed it carefully, and to his surprise, picked it up gently between its jaws. Instead of eating right there, Ramon headed towards the forest with the container. "I knew it!" Michael exclaimed, gently tapping the table with enthusiasm. "You're taking food to someone else." Intrigued by this behavior, Michael spent the next hour reviewing the recordings from previous days in more detail. He noticed a pattern in Ramon's movements. He always came out of the forest from the same direction and returned by the same path. The morning passed slowly as Michael kept his vigil in front of the screens. The heat increased relentlessly, making the air shimmer over the concrete surrounding the pool. Near midday, Ramon returned, this time without the container. The bear swam for several minutes, but its behavior was different. It seemed more anxious, constantly looking towards the forest. Michael adjusted the cameras, trying to better capture its movements. That's when something extraordinary happened. In one of the screens, Michael caught a movement among the trees. His heart skipped a beat when he saw a smaller, thinner figure emerge, a female bear. Her fur didn't shine like Ramon's. It looked dull and unkempt. Her movements were slow, almost hesitant. "My God," Michael whispered, leaning closer to the screen. "He has a family." The female bear, whom Michael immediately named Lola in honor of his mother, cautiously approached the pool. Ramon got out of the water and approached her in a gesture that seemed almost protective. Together they drank water from the edge of the pool. Michael was watching this intimate scene fascinated when he noticed something else. Behind Lola, barely visible in the shadows, two small figures were moving. The cubs were so small they could barely be distinguished in the recording, but they were there, clinging to their mother's flanks. Tears began to run down Michael's cheeks. They weren't tears of sadness, but of a deep emotion he couldn't explain. In that bear family, he saw his own story of love and loss reflected. "Isabella," he murmured, wiping away the tears, "you were right. Every creature has its purpose, and now I understand mine." The rest of the day, Michael dedicated himself to reorganizing his kitchen, making room for more provisions. His mind worked quickly, planning how he could help this family without interfering too much with their wild nature. That night, as he prepared more containers with food, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: a purpose. He was no longer just a lonely widower in a house too big. He was the secret guardian of a family that needed help. Tomorrow will be a new day, he told himself, as he looked at the stars from his window. In the reflection of the glass, he could swear he saw Isabella's smile, silently approving his new mission. The local supermarket had never seen Michael Ramirez buy so many provisions. His cart was full of fruits, vegetables, and honey, much more than a lonely man could consume. The cashier, an older woman named Martha, who had known him for years, couldn't help but comment. "Are you throwing a party, Mr. Ramirez?" she asked with a kind smile as she scanned the products. No, Michael replied, flashing a mysterious smile. "I'm just tending to a larger garden these days." Back home, as he arranged the groceries in the kitchen, Michael reflected on the changes in his life over the past week. The camera recordings had revealed more details about the bear family. Lola, the female bear, showed clear signs of weakness. Her movements were increasingly slow and she barely ate. "She needs help," Michael muttered, as he prepared several containers with fruits and vegetables. He had researched online about the diet of black bears and made sure to provide appropriate foods. The heat continued to be relentless. The thermometer read 102 degrees Fahrenheit, and the forecast indicated that temperatures would continue to rise. Michael had installed several sprinklers around the pool, creating humid and cool areas where the bears could rest. As he watched the camera screens, he noticed that the cubs were venturing closer and closer to the pool. They were curious and playful, though always under Ramon's watchful eye. Michael had named them Rose and Peter, after his younger siblings who had stayed in Mexico. "They're so small," he whispered, watching as they tried to imitate their father in the water. Ramon was surprisingly gentle with them, patiently guiding them as they learned to swim. The sound of an approaching engine interrupted his thoughts. Michael peeked out the window and saw a wildlife control office truck slowly patrolling the street. His heart raced. Had his neighbors noticed something? The truck passed by but left Michael uneasy. He knew he was walking on a very thin line. Feeding wild animals was illegal, and having bears on his property could be considered dangerous for the community. "They don't understand," he muttered as he watched Lola drink water from the pool. "They're just trying to survive." That afternoon, while watering the plants, he heard voices coming from the other side of his fence. It was his neighbors, the Thompsons, discussing large footprints they had found in their garden. "We should call animal control," Mrs. Thompson was saying. "It's dangerous to have bears so close to the houses." Michael felt a knot in his stomach. He needed to be more careful. That night, after the bears returned to the forest, he meticulously cleaned up any evidence of their presence. Footprints, empty containers, even traces of hair on the edge of the pool. As he worked, he remembered a conversation with Isabella years ago when they decided to move to this house away from town. "Sometimes, my love," she had told him, "the best act of kindness is the one no one else knows about." The following days, Michael established a more discreet routine. He placed the food before dawn and collected the containers as soon as the bears retreated. He installed motion sensor lights to be alert for any untimely visitors during the night. One morning, while reviewing the night recordings with Emily, they noticed something special. Lola had begun to prepare a specific space near the pool, typical behavior of bears close to giving birth. "She's almost ready," Emily confirmed. "It could be any day now." Michael felt overwhelming emotion. "When Ramon first appeared in my pool," he reflected, "I never imagined I'd be here, waiting for the birth of a new member of his family." The news of the imminent birth spread through the town like a wave of hope. People who had never shown interest in wildlife began to visit the sanctuary, captivated by the story of Lola and her family. "It's as if the whole community is waiting for this baby," Sarah commented during one of her daily visits. As the sun set over the sanctuary, Michael sat in his usual spot on the porch, watching the bear family enjoy their evening bath. Lola moved with the grace of one carrying new life, protected by the love of her family and the dedication of an entire community. "Look at what you've inspired, my love," Michael whispered to Isabella's photograph. "A simple act of kindness has turned into one miracle after another." The night Lola gave birth, the sky was full of stars. The thermal cameras captured the moment when the bear retreated to her special space, closely followed by Ramon and the older cubs. Michael and Emily monitored everything from the control center, holding their breath at every movement. "It's starting," Emily whispered, as the sensors showed changes in Lola's vital signs. The news spread quickly through the volunteer network. Soon the control center filled with familiar faces: Sarah Peterson, Martha, Jim, and other community members who had been an integral part of this extraordinary journey. The hours passed in an expectant silence, broken only by the soft hum of the monitoring equipment and occasional whispers of encouragement. Michael held Isabella's photograph, as he had done in every important moment since she passed. Near dawn it happened. The cameras captured the exact moment when two small cubs came into the world. Lola, demonstrating all the strength she had regained during her time at the sanctuary, tended to her new babies with a tenderness that moved everyone present. Two females, Emily confirmed, observing through the infrared cameras, and they seem perfectly healthy. Tears of joy ran down Michael's cheeks. "Isabella and Isabel," he whispered, naming the newborns in honor of his beloved wife. The following days brought a wave of celebration to the sanctuary. News of the birth spread beyond the town, attracting the attention of national media and conservation organizations. The story of the lonely widower who had created a wildlife refuge and the miraculous recovery and new motherhood of Lola touched hearts across the country. The sanctuary transformed even further. Universities began sending students to conduct research, conservation programs requested collaborations, and other communities started consulting on how to replicate the model. One morning, while watching Lola introducing her new cubs to sanctuary visitors from a safe distance, Michael reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a simple act of compassion. "You surprise me more every day," Emily said, joining him in his observation. "You've created something truly extraordinary here." "It wasn't me," Michael replied with a soft smile. "It was Isabella's love, living through each of us." The sanctuary continued to grow and evolve. Lola's older cubs began to explore wider territories, but always returned to the refuge they considered their home. Ramon maintained his role as guardian, now prouder than ever with his expanded family. The community was also permanently transformed, Where there was once division and mistrust, there was now unity and shared purpose. Former hunters became the most dedicated protectors. Children grew up with a new understanding and respect for nature, and the town became a model of harmonious coexistence between humans and wildlife. One afternoon, as the sun was setting over the sanctuary, Michael found Jim teaching a group of children about bear behavior. "I know what's the most important thing I've learned here?" Jim asked his young audience. "That love can change not just one heart, but an entire world." Michael smiled, remembering how much his own life had changed since that first encounter with Ramon in his pool. The loneliness that once consumed him had been replaced by a sense of purpose and connection deeper than he had ever imagined possible. "You were right, my love," he whispered to Isabella's photograph as he watched Lola guide her new cubs towards the pool. "Love never really dies. It just finds new ways to bloom." The sanctuary had become a living testament to that truth, a place where Isabella's legacy of love continued to grow and transform lives, both human and animal, one day at a time. And so, as the stars began to appear in the evening sky, Michael knew he had found more than a purpose. He had found a way to keep alive the love he and Isabella had shared by sharing it with the entire world. The following morning brought an unusual excitement to the sanctuary. Emily had arrived before dawn, urgently knocking on Michael's door. "I have to see this," she exclaimed, as she connected her tablet to the main screen of the monitoring center. The night images showed Lola behaving differently, more restless than usual. "I've been observing the patterns over the last week," Emily explained, pointing to different video sequences. "The signs are unmistakable. Lola is pregnant again." Michael sat down, overwhelmed by the news. The bear that had arrived so weak and sick in his backyard months ago was now strong enough to give life again. "It's a miracle," he whispered, remembering those first days when they feared for her survival. The news spread quickly through the community. Sarah Peterson organized an emergency meeting to prepare the sanctuary for the event. The volunteer veterinarians established special monitoring protocols, while Jim and his team increased security to ensure Lola's tranquility. "We need to create a more private space for her," Martha suggested, who had been researching black bear behavior during pregnancy. "Something near the pool but with enough cover." The volunteers worked tirelessly to adapt a section of the sanctuary. They built a protected area with natural vegetation and installed special night vision cameras to monitor Lola without disturbing her. Ramon seemed to understand the importance of the moment. His behavior became even more protective, but also gentler with Lola. The older cubs, now almost teenagers, also showed a special interest in their mother's condition. "It's fascinating," Emily commented as she documented the family behavior. "They're adapting their entire family dynamic to protect Lola and the future baby." The following days brought a series of preparations. The sanctuary's veterinary clinic was equipped with everything necessary for any emergency. Biology students from the local university volunteered for 24-hour observation shifts. One afternoon, while Michael was supervising the installation of new thermal sensors, he found Jim thoughtfully contemplating the bear family. "You know," said the former hunter, "when I first came here, I thought you were crazy for wanting to protect them. Now I can't imagine a world where this place didn't exist." Michael smiled, fully understanding that feeling of transformation. "Isabella used to say that love has the power to change the way we see the world." Lola's pregnancy became an event that united the community even more. Local schools incorporated the topic into their science classes. Local artists created works inspired by the bear family, and even the local newspaper dedicated a weekly column to sanctuary updates. One night, as Michael reviewed the day's recordings with Emily, they noticed something special. Lola had begun to prepare a specific space near the pool, typical behavior of bears close to giving birth. "She's almost ready," Emily confirmed. "It could be any day now." Michael felt overwhelming emotion. "When Ramon first appeared in my pool," he reflected, "I never imagined I'd be here, waiting for the birth of a new member of his family." The news of the imminent birth spread through the town like a wave of hope. People who had never shown interest in wildlife began to visit the sanctuary, captivated by the story of Lola and her family. "It's as if the whole community is waiting for this baby," Sarah commented during one of her daily visits. As the sun set over the sanctuary, Michael sat in his usual spot on the porch, watching the bear family enjoy their evening bath. Lola moved with the grace of one carrying new life, protected by the love of her family and the dedication of an entire community. "Look at what you've inspired, my love," Michael whispered to Isabella's photograph. A simple act of kindness has turned into one miracle after another. The night Lola gave birth, the sky was full of stars. The thermal cameras captured the moment when the bear retreated to her special space, closely followed by Ramon and the older cubs. Michael and Emily monitored everything from the control center, holding their breath at every movement. "It's starting," Emily whispered, as the sensors showed changes in Lola's vital signs. The news spread quickly through the volunteer network. Soon the control center filled with familiar faces: Sarah Peterson, Martha, Jim, and other community members who had been an integral part of this extraordinary journey. The hours passed in an expectant silence, broken only by the soft hum of the monitoring equipment and occasional whispers of encouragement. Michael held Isabella's photograph, as he had done in every important moment since she passed. Near dawn it happened. The cameras captured the exact moment when 3 small cubs came into the world. Lola, demonstrating all the strength she had regained during her time at the sanctuary, tended to her new babies with a tenderness that moved everyone present. 2 males and a female, Emily confirmed, observing through the infrared cameras, and they all seemed perfectly healthy. Tears of joy ran down Michael's cheeks. "Carlos, Miguel, and Maria," he whispered, naming the newborns in honor of his family members. The following days brought a wave of celebration to the sanctuary. News of the birth spread beyond the town, attracting the attention of national media and conservation organizations. The story of the lonely widower who had created a wildlife refuge and the miraculous recovery and new motherhood of Lola touched hearts across the country. The sanctuary transformed even further. Universities began sending students to conduct research, conservation programs requested collaborations, and other communities started consulting on how to replicate the model. One morning, while watching Lola introducing her new cubs to sanctuary visitors from a safe distance, Michael reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with a simple act of compassion. "You surprise me more every day," Emily said, joining him in his observation. "You've created something truly extraordinary here." "It wasn't me," Michael replied with a soft smile. "It was Isabella's love, living through each of us." The sanctuary continued to grow and evolve. Lola's older cubs began to explore wider territories, but always returned to the refuge they considered their home. Ramon maintained his role as guardian, now prouder than ever with his expanded family. The community was also permanently transformed. Where there was once division and mistrust, there was now unity and shared purpose. Former hunters became the most dedicated protectors. Children grew up with a new understanding and respect for nature, and the town became a model of harmonious coexistence between humans and wildlife. One afternoon, as the sun was setting over the sanctuary, Michael found Jim teaching a group of children about bear behavior. "I know what's the most important thing I've learned here?" Jim asked his young audience. "That love can change not just one heart, but an entire world." Michael smiled, remembering how much his own life had changed since that first encounter with Ramon in his pool. The loneliness that once consumed him had been replaced by a sense of purpose and connection deeper than he had ever imagined possible. "You were right, my love," he whispered to Isabella's photograph as he watched Lola guide her new cubs towards the pool. "Love never really dies. It just finds new ways to bloom." The sanctuary had become a living testament to that truth, a place where Isabella's legacy of love continued to grow and transform lives, both human and animal, one day at a time. As the years passed, the sanctuary grew beyond Michael's wildest dreams. What had started as a simple act of kindness in his backyard had blossomed into a nationally recognized wildlife conservation center. The story of Ramon, Lola, and their growing family had captured hearts across the country, inspiring similar initiatives in other communities. Michael, now in his 70s, watched with pride as a new generation took up the mantle of caring for the sanctuary. Emily had become the lead researcher, publishing groundbreaking studies on bear behavior and climate adaptation. Jim, once a hunter, now led educational programs, teaching children and adults alike about the importance of wildlife conservation. The original pool where it all began had been preserved as a historical site within the sanctuary. A small plaque told the story of Michael and Isabella, and how their love had sparked a movement that changed an entire community's relationship with nature. One crisp autumn morning, as Michael sat on his porch watching the leaves turn golden, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The loneliness that had once consumed him felt like a distant memory. In its place was a deep sense of fulfillment and connection, not just to the bears and the sanctuary, but to the entire community that had come together to make this dream a reality. "Isabella," he whispered, holding her photograph close to his heart. "I wish you could see this. Your love has created something beautiful beyond imagination." As if in response, a gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the distant sound of bear cubs playing in the sanctuary. Michael smiled, feeling Isabella's presence in every leaf, every sunbeam, and every joyful sound that echoed through the sanctuary. The legacy of love that had started with a lonely widower and a curious bear had grown into something that would outlive them all, a testament to the power of compassion, the strength of community, and the enduring nature of love. And as the sun set on another day at the sanctuary, Michael knew that this was just the beginning. The story of Ramon, Lola, and their family would continue to inspire generations to come, reminding everyone who visited that even the smallest act of kindness can create ripples that change the world. "Thank you," Michael whispered to the evening sky, his heart full of gratitude for the unexpected journey that had given his life new purpose and meaning. As darkness fell, the lights of the sanctuary twinkled like stars, guiding both animals and humans to a place of safety, learning, and connection. And in that moment, Michael felt more certain than ever that love, in all its forms, was the most powerful force in the universe, capable of bridging divides, healing wounds, and creating miracles. The story of the sanctuary and its bear family continued to unfold, each day bringing new challenges and joys. Michael, though no longer involved in the day-to-day operations, remained a beloved figure, often seen walking the paths of the sanctuary, sharing stories with visitors about the early days. One day, a young girl approached Michael as he sat on a bench near the original pool. Her eyes were wide with wonder as she asked, "Mr. Ramirez, is it true that you made friends with a bear?" Michael chuckled softly. "Well, young lady, it's a bit more complicated than that. But yes, I did form a special bond with a bear named Ramon. Would you like to hear the story?" The girl nodded eagerly, and soon a small crowd gathered around Michael. He began to tell the tale of that scorching summer day when he first saw Ramon in his pool. As he spoke, his eyes twinkled with the joy of reliving those memories. "You see," he explained, "sometimes life gives us unexpected gifts. For me, it was the chance to help these magnificent creatures and, in doing so, to help our community find a new way of living in harmony with nature." As Michael's story unfolded, Emily approached the group, leading a tour of researchers from various universities. She paused, smiling as she saw Michael captivating his audience. "And here we have the heart and soul of our sanctuary," Emily announced to her group. "Michael Ramirez, the man whose compassion started it all." Michael waved off the introduction with a humble smile. "The real heroes are the bears," he said. "They taught us more about adaptation, family, and resilience than we could ever have learned on our own." Later that evening, as Michael prepared for bed, he heard a familiar sound from the backyard. Looking out his window, he saw Ramon, older now but still majestic, leading his extended family to the pool for an evening swim. Lola was there too, watching over her grandcubs with the same gentle attention she had shown her own babies years ago. Michael's heart swelled with emotion. He thought of Isabella, of how proud she would be of what their love had created. As he watched the bears enjoy their nightly ritual, he felt a deep sense of peace wash over him. "We did it, my love," he whispered to Isabella's photograph on his nightstand. "We created a legacy of love that will live on long after we're gone." As Michael drifted off to sleep, the sounds of the sanctuary, the gentle splashing of water, the distant calls of nocturnal birds, and the soft rustling of leaves created a lullaby of nature in harmony. And in his dreams, Michael saw Isabella smiling and radiant, walking with him through a sanctuary that stretched as far as the eye could see, filled with animals living in peace and humans learning to coexist with the natural world. The next morning brought a surprise visitor to the sanctuary. A renowned wildlife photographer had heard about the unique story of Ramon and Lola and had come to document their life. Michael, along with Emily and Jim, gave the photographer a tour of the sanctuary, sharing anecdotes and insights gathered over the years. As they approached the pool area, they saw Ramon and Lola teaching their youngest cubs how to fish. The photographer was awestruck, capturing moment after moment of the bears' natural behavior. "This is unprecedented," the photographer whispered, her camera clicking rapidly. "I've never seen bears so at ease around human structures, yet still maintaining their wild instincts." Michael nodded, a proud smile on his face. "It's all about respect and understanding. We've learned as much from them as they have from us." The photo shoot lasted several days, during which the photographer captured not only the bears, but also the daily life of the sanctuary. She photographed the educational programs, the research teams at work, and the community volunteers who had become an integral part of the sanctuary's success. On the final day of her visit, the photographer sat with Michael on his porch, reviewing some of the images she had captured. One photo in particular caught Michael's eye. It showed Ramon standing at the edge of the pool, looking directly at the camera, with an almost human-like expression of curiosity and intelligence. "That's it," Michael said softly. "That's the moment I first saw in Ramon's eyes all those years ago. The moment I realized we weren't so different after all." The photographer nodded, understanding the significance of the image. "Mr. Ramirez, your story, and the story of this sanctuary, is going to inspire people around the world. It shows that coexistence is possible, that we can find ways to live in harmony with nature, if we approach it with an open heart and mind." As the photographer packed up her equipment, preparing to leave, she turned to Michael one last time. "You know, in all my years of wildlife photography, I've never seen anything quite like this. You've created something truly magical here." Michael smiled, his eyes misting slightly. "I just opened my heart to the unexpected. The real magic happened when everyone else did the same." After the photographer left, Michael sat on his porch, reflecting on how far they had come. The sanctuary had grown from a backyard refuge to a sprawling haven for wildlife, a center for research, and a model for community engagement in conservation. He thought about the countless lives that had been touched, the school children who had learned to appreciate nature, the former hunters who had found a new purpose in protection, the researchers who had made groundbreaking discoveries, and of course, the bears and other wildlife that had found a safe haven. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the sanctuary, Michael heard the familiar sounds of the bear family making their way to the pool. He watched as Ramon, now showing signs of age with streaks of gray in his fur, led the procession. Lola followed, surrounded by cubs of various ages, a testament to the thriving bear population that now called the sanctuary home. Michael's thoughts drifted to Isabella. How amazed she would be to see what their love had created. He could almost hear her laugh, could almost feel her hand in his as they watched the bears together. "Oh, Isabella," he whispered, "if only you could see this. Our little act of kindness has grown into something so much bigger than us." As if in response to his words, a cool breeze rustled through the trees, carrying with it the scent of wildflowers. Michael closed his eyes, letting the peacefulness of the moment wash over him. The next morning brought a flurry of activity to the sanctuary. Emily burst into Michael's kitchen, her eyes bright with excitement. "Michael, you won't believe this," she exclaimed, setting her laptop on the table. "The photos from last week's shoot have gone viral. Our story is everywhere." Michael peered at the screen, amazed to see images of Ramon, Lola, and the sanctuary splashed across major news websites. Headlines proclaimed, "The man who befriended bears," and "How one act of compassion changed a community." "This is incredible," Michael murmured, scrolling through the articles. "But what does it mean for us?" Emily's grin widened. "It means we're about to get a lot busier. We've already received calls from 3 major conservation organizations wanting to partner with us. And the governor's office reached out. They want to use our sanctuary as a model for a statewide wildlife protection initiative." As the day progressed, the impact of their newfound fame became clear. The sanctuary's phone lines were flooded with calls from people wanting to visit, volunteer, or donate. Sarah Peterson, now the town's mayor, called to inform them that the town council had unanimously voted to expand the sanctuary's protected land. "It's happening, Michael," Sarah said, her voice filled with emotion. "What you and Isabella dreamed of, It's becoming a reality on a scale we never imagined. That afternoon, as Michael walked through the sanctuary with Jim, overseeing the preparation for the influx of new visitors, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. You know, Jim," he said, pausing to watch a family of deer grazing peacefully near the trail, "when I first moved here with Isabella, all I wanted was a quiet place to spend our golden years. I never dreamed we'd end up changing the world." Jim chuckled, clapping Michael on the shoulder. "Funny how life works out, isn't it? Here I was, a lifelong hunter, now dedicating my life to protecting the very animals I once pursued, all because you had the courage to see the beauty in a nuisance bear." As they continued their walk, they came across a group of schoolchildren on a field trip. The kids were gathered around Emily, listening in rapt attention as she explained the intricate social structures of bear families. "And you see," Emily was saying, pointing to where Ramon and Lola could be seen in the distance, "bears are not so different from us. They love their families, they play, they learn, and they grieve. By understanding them, we learn to be better stewards of our shared world." Michael watched as the children's eyes widened with wonder and understanding. He saw in their faces the same spark of compassion that had led him to help Ramon all those years ago. That night, as Michael sat on his porch, watching the stars come out over the sanctuary, he felt a presence beside him. Though he knew it was impossible, he could almost swear he felt Isabella's hand in his. "We did it, my love," he whispered to the night air. "We created something beautiful, something that will outlast us both." The gentle breeze that rustled through the trees seemed to carry Isabella's laughter, and Michael smiled, feeling more at peace than he had in years. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The sanctuary became a hub of conservation efforts, drawing researchers, volunteers, and visitors from around the world. Michael found himself sharing his story again and again, each time marveling at how a simple act of kindness had snowballed into a movement that was changing lives and protecting wildlife on a scale he had never imagined. One particularly memorable day came when a group of international conservationists visited the sanctuary. Among them was Dr. Jane Goodall, the renowned primatologist and anthropologist. As Michael led her through the sanctuary, sharing the story of Ramon and Lola, he was struck by the deep understanding in her eyes. "Mr. Ramirez," Dr. Goodall said, her voice filled with warmth, "what you've created here is extraordinary. It's a testament to the power of compassion and the importance of coexistence between humans and wildlife. Your sanctuary could serve as a model for conservation efforts worldwide." Michael felt a surge of emotion at her words. "Thank you, Dr. Goodall. That means more than you know. We've just tried to do what's right, to honor the connection between all living things." As they reached the original pool where it all began, they paused to watch Ramon and his family enjoying the water. Dr. Goodall observed them with a scientist's keen eye and an animal lover's warm heart. "You know," she said softly, "in my years of working with chimpanzees, I've learned that the line between humans and animals is far more blurred than most people realize. Your bears, Mr. Ramirez, they demonstrate a level of intelligence and emotional complexity that many would find surprising. But you saw it, didn't you? Right from the beginning." Michael nodded, remembering that first night when he looked into Ramon's eyes and saw something more than just a wild animal. "I saw a soul," he said simply. "Just like mine, just like Isabella's. Scared, in need of help, but full of life and love." Dr. Goodall smiled, her eyes twinkling. "That recognition, that empathy, is what the world needs more of. Your sanctuary isn't just protecting these bears, Mr. Ramirez. It's teaching people to see the world differently, and that, in the end, is how we'll save our planet." As the day drew to a close and the visitors prepared to leave, Dr. Goodall turned to Michael one last time. "Mr. Ramirez, would you consider sharing your story at our next International Conservation Conference? I believe your experience could inspire similar initiatives around the world." Michael was stunned by the invitation. I would be honored, Dr. Goodall. Thank you." After the visitors had gone, Michael sat on his porch, overwhelmed by the day's events. He held Isabella's photograph in his hands, tracing her smile with his finger. "Can you believe it, my love?" he whispered. "Dr. Jane Goodall herself, here in our sanctuary, and she wants me to speak at a conference. Oh, how you would have loved this day." As the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Michael heard the now familiar sound of the bear family making their way to the pool for their evening swim. He watched as Ramon led the way, his gait a bit slower now but still majestic. Lola followed with their youngest cubs, while the older ones playfully wrestled with each other. The sight filled Michael's heart with joy and a profound sense of purpose. What had started as a lonely widower's act of kindness had grown into something that was changing the world. And through it all, Michael felt Isabella's love guiding him, living on in every bear saved, every mind changed, every heart opened. As he prepared for bed that night, Michael paused at his window, looking out over the sanctuary that had become his life's work. The moonlight bathed the landscape in a soft, silvery glow, and in the distance he could just make out the silhouettes of the bears settling down for the night. "Good night, my friends," he whispered. "Good night, Isabella. Thank you for showing me the way." And as he drifted off to sleep, Michael's dreams were filled with images of a world where humans and animals lived in harmony, where love and compassion guided every action. It was a beautiful dream, and one that, thanks to the sanctuary, was becoming more of a reality every day. The morning of the International Conservation Conference arrived, and Michael found himself standing backstage, nervously adjusting his tie. The auditorium was filled with conservationists, scientists, and policymakers from around the world. As he peered out at the crowd, Michael felt a moment of doubt. How could he, a simple man who had stumbled into this role, have anything to say to these experts? Just then, he felt a gentle hand on his shoulder. It was Emily, who had accompanied him to the conference. "You've got this, Michael," she said with a reassuring smile. "Just speak from your heart like you always do. Your story is powerful because it's real and it comes from a place of love." Michael nodded, taking a deep breath. He reached into his pocket and touched the photograph of Isabella he always carried with him. Drawing strength from her memory, he stepped onto the stage as his name was announced. The bright lights momentarily blinded him, but as his eyes adjusted, he saw hundreds of faces looking at him expectantly. For a moment, he froze. Then, he saw Dr. Goodall in the front row, nodding encouragingly. Michael took another deep breath and began to speak. "Good morning," he said, his voice wavering slightly before finding its strength. "My name is Michael Ramirez, and I'm here to tell you a story about love, loss, and unexpected second chances. It's a story about a lonely widower and a curious bear, and how their unlikely friendship changed not just their lives, but an entire community's relationship with nature." As Michael spoke, sharing the tale of Ramon's first appearance in his pool, of Lola's recovery, and of the sanctuary's growth, he saw the audience lean in, captivated. He spoke of the challenges they'd faced, the skeptics they'd won over, and the transformations they'd witnessed, both in the animals and in the people of his town. "What I've learned," Michael said, his voice filled with emotion, "is that compassion is a powerful force. It can bridge the gap between species, heal wounds both visible and invisible, and inspire change on a scale we never thought possible. Our sanctuary started with a simple act of kindness, but it has grown into a model of coexistence that I believe can be replicated around the world." As he concluded his speech, Michael looked out at the audience and saw something he hadn't expected: tears in the eyes of many listeners. The applause that followed was thunderous, and as Michael left the stage, he was immediately surrounded by people eager to learn more, to collaborate, to bring the sanctuary's model to their own communities. Later that evening, at a reception following the conference, Michael found himself in conversation with conservation leaders from across the globe. A woman from India shared her struggles with human-elephant conflict, and how Michael's story had given her new ideas for promoting coexistence. A man from Brazil wanted to know more about how the sanctuary had won over former hunters, seeing parallels with his own work in the Amazon. As Michael spoke with these passionate individuals, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. The sanctuary wasn't just a local success story, it had the potential to inspire global change. Dr. Goodall approached Michael as the evening was winding down. "Mr. Ramirez," she said, her eyes twinkling, "I do believe you've started a movement today. Your speech touched hearts and opened minds." People are already talking about the Ramirez model of wildlife conservation. Michael felt a blush creep up his cheeks. "I'm just a man who helped a bear," he said humbly. Dr. Goodall shook her head, smiling. "You're much more than that, Mr. Ramirez. You're a beacon of hope in a world that desperately needs it." Your story reminds us all of the power of individual action and the importance of leading with love. As Michael prepared to leave the conference the next day, his phone was flooded with messages from Emily and Sarah. News of his speech had reached their town, and the community was buzzing with excitement. Local businesses were pledging support for the sanctuary's expansion. Schools were developing new conservation curriculums, and neighboring towns were reaching out to learn how they could start their own wildlife protection initiatives. On the flight home, Michael gazed out the window at the patchwork of wilderness and human development below. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from a grieving widower to a reluctant wildlife savior to an international conservation icon. Through it all, he had been guided by love, his love for Isabella, for Ramon and Lola, for the community that had embraced his vision, and for the natural world that had given him a second chance at a meaningful life. As the plane began its descent, Michael's thoughts turned to the future. He knew there would be challenges ahead, expanding the sanctuary, managing its growing fame, ensuring its long-term sustainability. But he also knew that he wasn't alone. He had a community behind him, a world of new allies and the enduring spirit of Isabella to guide him. The sanctuary was no longer just a haven for bears or a local attraction. It had become a symbol of hope, a model for a new way of living in harmony with nature. And Michael, the unassuming widower who had once sought only solitude, had become a catalyst for change. As he stepped off the plane, Michael was greeted by a crowd of familiar faces: Emily, Sarah, Jim, and many others from the community. They cheered and waved, holding up a banner that read, "Welcome home, Michael, our wildlife hero." Michael felt tears welling up in his eyes as he embraced his friends. This was more than a homecoming. It was a celebration of a shared dream, a collective achievement. "I can't wait to see Ramon and Lola," he said as they walked to the car. "I have so much to tell them." Emily laughed. "I'm sure they'll be just as excited to see you. The sanctuary hasn't been the same without you, even if it was just for a few days." As they drove through town, Michael was struck by the changes he saw. New murals depicting local wildlife adorned buildings, wildlife-friendly signs hung in shop windows, and he even spotted a group of children picking up litter in the park, each wearing t-shirts with the sanctuary's logo. "The whole town has been inspired by your speech," Sarah explained. "People are looking at our community with new eyes, seeing the potential for harmony between humans and nature." When they finally arrived at the sanctuary, Michael felt a sense of homecoming that went beyond the physical place. As he stepped out of the car, he heard a familiar sound, the splash of water and the playful grunts of bears enjoying the pool. Walking to his usual spot on the porch, Michael saw Ramon and Lola, along with their extended family, frolicking in the water. As if sensing his presence, Ramon looked up, meeting Michael's gaze with that same intelligent, curious expression that had started it all. "Hello, old friend," Michael said softly. "We did it. We're changing the world, one heart at a time." As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Michael sat on his porch, surrounded by friends both human and ursine. He held Isabella's photograph in his hands, feeling her presence in the gentle breeze that rustled through the trees. "Thank you, my love," he whispered. "Thank you for teaching me that love knows no boundaries, that compassion can move mountains, and that it's never too late to make a difference." And as the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Michael knew that this was not an ending, but a new beginning. The sanctuary and the movement it had inspired would continue to grow and evolve, touching lives and changing hearts for generations to come. In that moment, surrounded by the fruits of his labor and the love of his community, Michael Ramirez, the man who had befriended bears and inspired the world, felt truly at peace.